Hey, everybody, welcome back to the show. I'm your host, Stuart Cranes, and this is your inside track to success. As always, have a great guest for you this week. And just to tell you a little bit more about her, she is somebody that I've actually known for quite some time, is a tremendously talented artist and also just a great personality, like fills up a room with her presence, her energy when she enters a space. And I know that we'll learn a lot from her today, both in terms of going for the career and the lifestyle of your dreams, and also probably just going to learn a bit more about, what it is to be your true authentic self. Before we jump in, please like, subscribe, share this with a friend. Like, this show can only grow based on you, the listeners, sharing this out, getting this information out there, and we appreciate it as well. So, without further ado, want to introduce Alison Caswell of Campus Sculptures. Alison, thank you for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's just so good to see you again. I think the last time we talked and last time I saw you in person was like over a decade ago, but it feels like kind of yesterday at the same time.
Yeah. Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that maybe one of the good things that happened from the pandemic is just normalizing face to face communication over the internet and, reaching out to folks to reconnect and recreate the friendships that maybe, I don't want to say ended, but just paused for life reasons happening the way they did. So I know that you and I met as students. We were both working in the dorms at the University of Oregon. And, I remember you getting your business just going, like starting it from square one, ground zero, in the mess halls, like just sitting there planning it out with you. Not to take any credit, but just to see what you have created for yourself over the last several years is truly exciting and remarkable. And I know that a lot of people listening to this show have dreams, have goals, have maybe the job they don't like, but they have a creative pursuit, a creative endeavor, and maybe are just afraid to take that plunge. So, Allison, I would love if you could just start out telling us about the work that you do as a sculptor and how it became what it is today.
Yeah, yeah. I remember talking to you too, and in the residence halls, and I couldn't find it before our meeting, but I remember you gave me like my very first dollar. And it was so nice of you. Like you framed it and everything for me and wrote on it, and it had my business name, Campus Sculptures, on the top, and I still have that um somewhere. I still have that, and one of the things that's most valuable to me, actually. And
Awesome.
yeah, so in what my company is, Campus Sculptures, um, is so I started out in business as an artist, casting my work in bronze, and doing a licensing partnership program with universities to create fine
Mhm.
art. And so starting with University of Oregon was like really fun because of the duck mascot and how much recognition and attention that the duck gets from everywhere, like all over the country, all over the world. Like I was in
Mhm.
Africa and literally saw someone with like a O on their hat, and I was like, "Go Ducks!" And they're like, "Yeah." Like southernmost tip of Africa. Um, and so yeah, so I've created sculptures for a number of universities now, and that's blossomed past only universities now. I'll do commission projects um and all, and I still work with a lot of universities, but I'll do portraits, I'll do um like, for example, I have a Mother Mary right now,
Wow.
that's coming up down the pipeline. um and so it's been a really natural extension of me, I feel like. And that's been a really wonderful way to be in business, is is kind of just living in this lifestyle of surrender to the process and knowing that there's that money is like it's not the goal, it's the byproduct of our relationships and the connections that we make. And the boldness out of making those connections is why I'm here today, because you reached out to me, right?
Hmm.
And what you're outlining. And I do think that like that's really an important tool and skill to have the right, not, I shouldn't say right, but to have a bold mindset toward. And it makes some really special relationships happen, and then life and business unfolds from those, is my belief. Yeah, and so that's how I got started. Was I did a sculpture of the Oregon duck, and everything just is kind of snowballed as an effect from that starting point. And but yeah, I mean, more so than the artwork in and of itself, there's really wonderful inspiration stories that are why I get excited. Um, yeah, and so it's about connecting to me.
Yeah. Yeah, and folks, we're definitely going to link Allison's website, social media to the notes on this so you can view her work for yourself and see just how awesome it is. We're not talking just little pieces that might sit on the desk. I'm talking, you know, at our alma mater, University of Oregon, there stands a, how tall is it? Maybe 8, 9 feet statue
Mhm.
of the Oregon duck greeting you as you drive down Franklin Avenue, past the basketball stadium. And this is all Allison's work. And so you hit on a couple of things, couple different directions I feel like we could go, but you were talking about relationships a lot. What do you feel people need to create and cultivate relationships that further them in their lives towards their goals or even just for their overall, quality of life?
Yeah, yeah. So when I was at U of O, and you might remember this. I don't know if it was before we met or during, but I was as a student on the University of Oregon Bookstore Board of Directors, and
Hmm.
the general manager at the time, Jim Williams, who he just passed in March, actually,
Mm.
and just went to his memorial service, and
Hmm.
that was nice to see. It was kind of like a reunion to celebrate his life, and but he really was a special person to me and a lot of other people, in that the language he used, and he took the Oregon bookstore from like over the span of at least 30 years, uh, from really being a small bookstore presence to like an incredible people-based business. And in all of our meetings, the meetings would go any which way. We'd be talking about finances or whatever, and he would always stop us and say, "How is this about people? Like, let's
Wow.
stop and think that." I know, and seeing that be a framework for business was really unique. And me being a student, I didn't have any other experience of real world interactions or anything like to compare that to. And so I knew it was special at the time, but now with some life experience, I realize truly how wonderful that line of thinking and that value system is as a
Hmm.
compass. And so really that began a habit within me, and I know a lot of other people too who brushed shoulders with Jim. uh, I will now. I've made it part of my practice to stop myself whenever I'm trying to do anything and think, how is this about people, and how can how can I how can I love other people essentially with the actions of what I do and how I present myself. I try my best, but then how can I tell stories that connect us all through this art process, and this journey of creating. And so that's what relationships really are to me, is it's a way of expressing, and that's the importance of creating a win-win. um, and when I say the word business, that's really all I mean, is working together with other people to create situations where we can grow ourselves together and tell stories together rather than apart, and then relate to each other
Mhm.
in different ways that we can kind of co-discover. And it's not like a one-sided thing. um Venturing out in the world thinking like, how am I going to make a living? That's not really the point. um we need to eat and buy things, but like, I think that we're taken care of, and the whole point is basically an expression of, okay, what through this art piece do we want to communicate, and how do we bring people together in that process? And mascots are like a really surprisingly potently emotional subject matter. And I mean, it was incredible when I was doing that, the duck in front of the Ford Alumni, in the Ford Alumni Plaza by Matthew Knight. Uh, it was in clay, and I remember wheeling the clay down the street because I was wanting to present like the clay duck at a football game, and I forget which game it was, but I had to do it in two parts. And so I was like wheeling this gigantic head, and then I had to go back and wheel this like a gigantic butt with a tail and like legs, and put it all up. It was, I think back to the things that I've done, I'm like, how did I do these things? I just schlepped like crazy amounts of weirdly shaped large art things. But I do remember uh when I was showing that, there was this guy that came up to me and he just started crying because the piece meant so much to him and his family. He had collected a smaller sculpture, and it really touched me how it doesn't really matter necessarily what the subject matter is, like any way and any connection point that we can find to bring people together so that we can share in our experiences really is a deep and heartfelt way to go about life,
Yeah.
and that really stirs within people that desire when they see that in art of whatever kind or substance, I feel.
Wow. That was phenomenal. And I was taking notes on everything you were just sharing. So thank you. Um, so it's pretty clear how your work is about people, Allison, and bringing it together. Obviously, you mentioned mascots happen to be a very natural focal point. Everybody has a shared experience who is an alumnus of a particular university. For folks who are listening to this who have creative ideas, how would you coach them to making it about people, making their work about people when they are so concerned about feeding themselves or the pressure to make money through their art?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that the same process of relating to others, and perhaps often overlooked, um, as people venture out or contemplate venturing out, into the world beyond themselves, is you take that framework, for thinking about how is this going to benefit someone else, and you apply that to yourself. Like,
Mhm.
how is this, and I say the word benefit in the truest sense of not looking to necessarily um, derive something from someone else for your own gain only, but what's the meaning? And
Mm.
if you ask yourself, what do I mean to myself? Um, and if someone were to ask me, like, um, it seems like you think a lot of yourself, I would say yes. I do think quite often of myself, and it's a very loving experience. And I think that really that's one of the first hurdles of doing anything, is getting right and centered within yourself. And very technically, I went through a process of intentionally monitoring my thoughts about who I am, what I stand for, and what I'm venturing out to do in concept. And it's so easy to think of ways and scenarios, uh, buy-in of which something may not work. It's like, um, and we can stop doing that pretty
Yeah.
quickly. It's I think literally it's retraining our minds to think like I'm not capable, or I have this limitation, or I can't do this because of blah de blah. Someone told me whatever, and I ruminated about that enough to where it kind of became a part of me, and now I think that
Sure.
way.
Yeah.
And it's just stopping for a while to to disrupt that process. And I know you know what I'm talking about, but this has been my internal work of really, really, really saying, okay, um, I'm going to love myself. Uh, and every time I feel inclined to think in a way that doesn't serve my objective, I'll just stop myself. And I noticed it took me really a few weeks of being intentional about that, of turning like, I'm really afraid into saying thoughts of like, Allison, you're doing great, and I love you, and we can trust. And that's really all it took for me to break that cycle. And I think literally I was listening to one YouTube person, and I don't exactly remember the science behind it. I know there's a lot out there, but she described like a peptide reaction in the brain, I
Hmm.
believe it was, and how we can get kind of addicted to our negative processes of thought. Like it
Yeah.
feels, it like hurts good, kind of, to like
Yeah.
feel victimy, you know, and like woe is whatever. But and life gives us lots of reasons to think that way, if we decide to go that direction. Um, but I really think that those thoughts are actually calls for us to become self-aware. Like if I think a thought of, and I'm maybe dominating the conversation with my internal dialogue, but it's that important to my business. That that it's been me stopping and thinking about what it is that I want,
Hmm.
that's not necessarily a desire from me, but it's from the source of who I am, and and then protecting that with a very specific intention of pursuing self-love, and and the narrative that goes along with that, as opposed to falling into self-doubt and limitations and taking the world at face value, and listening to the people who, maybe have not yet learned to be intentional themselves about what they speak, and allow them to think themselves to think. And so I would say, when venturing out, or when contemplating going for something, I would say like, oh, I remembered what I was going to say. Whenever I have a thought that appears to be like self-limiting, or if I have like something kind of egoic, is the word that I guess I'm deciding to use. I think the ego is our best friend, because it's a call to understand a larger message. And if I feel like it's a decoding, at least that's how I view it. And so if I have a thought that's maybe an insecure thought at face value, like, oh, Allison, you're not like smart enough to do this, or blah blah blah. I'll sit and I'll ask myself, okay, that thought popped up in my head. Um, what's the source of this? And I think I need to decode this message. And if I sit with that long enough, that's become a really valuable asset. And so many people are like wanting to silence the ego or
Hmm.
demonize our mind, but I really believe that it can be our greatest tool
Sure.
in really valuing these messages that pop up, and not trying to silence our brains, because our brains are important and we need our thought processes and the ability to wrap our intellect around things. Um, but if we stop ourselves and decode what our thoughts are really saying, they're actually enlightening. And if I think like, well, I'm not, smart enough, blah 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 blah, if I sit with that and I think, okay, I'm feeling insecure about moving forward with my own, like maybe I don't feel like I can understand this yet. Um, never failing, I will get the true message of whatever is behind that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And and it will be something like, I really value how my brain works, and that'll be the message. And it's a journey of how to value myself and
Yeah.
not misinterpret the messages that I think it's so easy to get lost in, but really it's just ourselves trying to tell us, you know, how great we all are. And with and through that really comes adventure, and the
Yeah.
process, I believe, is laid out for us, and there's really not a whole lot that we can do, um, either to speed up or slow down what does lie out in the whatever for us. All we have to do is surrender to that, and our abilities and intellect and heart and lifestyle and space will all follow. And
Yeah.
um, so when someone's thinking about starting a cause or going off in business or creating something or trying to pursue a relationship or whatever it is that we want, I think it's important for us to acknowledge that our wants and desires are not necessarily ours.
Hmm.
They are within us for a reason, and we are right to pursue those. Um, because if we don't, we're really robbing the world of something special.
Yeah.
Um, and and so we owe it to those around us in our society and ourselves to be happy, and to honor our wants and desires and needs. And so starting off in business, it's truly, for at least me, it's been, how do I think about it? And I've chosen and practiced and have intuited to think about it in a way of, you know, I have an obligation to be joyful and happy and fulfilled, right?
Hmm.
And I am deciding to talk to myself in a loving way, because the stronger my relationship with myself, then I have so much more to give. And
Yeah.
you know, um, and I think other people really uh, derive a lot of inspiration from that. The art's one thing, and that message reverberates through the art in whatever ways I don't understand. People do feel it, but it's really growing your love and then putting that out into the world in a very intentional way. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, and I understand the fears. Like I really, really, really do understand the fears. But we have a responsibility, I believe, to ourselves to retrain our thinking. And it only took a couple of weeks, really, of changing that process. Um, and then it became second nature for me, and that's I keep my mind, or I try and do. um, keep my mind pretty safeguarded in how I want to think.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, I heard a lot in everything you just shared, and maybe the one that is resonating with me right now is just the concept of when we are secure in ourselves, when we understand and know who we are and are then able to show up and bring our whole selves to the party, bring our whole selves to relationships, our artwork, the business that we're looking to start, that's when the magic starts to occur because we're not holding ourselves back. We're not denying ourselves from our own greatness. And we're also not denying the world of our gifts, is what I heard you say, and all that. And so I'm curious, since this is kind of the topic we're on, how do you identify yourself as Alison Caswell in the world? Like, who is she and what is she bringing to the table currently?
Hmm. Yeah, I went through one exercise um, where I wrote down who uh, who I am, and I feel like I've been really practicing knowing myself really well. I think I might have, I might not, but I think I do have this written down. I totally do. Who I am.
Oh, I love that.
It's kind of like happened to me in my drawer next to my desk. Here's what I wrote. I am someone whose purpose it is to channel joy and radiate it to others. I see beauty in the world around me and connect with other people through sharing creative stories, bringing out joy, fun, silliness, and beauty so people can connect with each other through it too. I am someone who wants to live in purity, congruence, and have uh, powerfully and can powerfully put that into the world when I'm inspired. I care about others, and I practice intentional kindness, joyfully wanting other people to shine in their own ways. Um, and so that's just on paper, I guess, you know. But I think that that when we um, when we're really able to say, you know, I've got I've got nothing on my chest here, like God, there's nothing between us,
Hmm.
you know, take anything that could be, search my soul kinds of conversations, you know. Um and surrendering that, then you do get a sense for who you are. And even to the extent of when you're out in the world experiencing other people and giving of yourself to other people, it's like, what part of me am I going to call upon? You know, I have
Hmm.
this part of me that's joy, and then I have this part of me, that's my self protector, and I have
Of
this
course.
part of that, right. And instead of um, having those parts come out and present themselves as situations require, um, I can say, you know, I want my joy to to step forward, and in that I want it to partner with the wisdom part of me in this. And getting to know ourselves as a system, I think, has been important for me, because then it becomes real. I think we become
Mhm.
real to ourselves and not so reactionary. We can not only intentionally guide our thoughts, but we can intentionally guide our internal system,
Yeah.
in how we want to present and apply that to other people. And that's the purity that I'm talking about. That
Mhm.
process is getting away from worry and distraction, and wondering about bills or rent or whatever. All of that, I assume life will just cover for me, and it
Mhm.
has. That's not my point of why I'm here, or why I'm doing what I'm doing. Um, and so it's really it's graduating past the worries and concerns of everyday distractions, um and just treating those like they'll be there. Like, they'll just be there, and they're fine, they're good, they're a way for us to, um field things from others that we can then in turn decide how we want to process and then re-present back to the world. But those things in and of themselves um, are where a lot of people can get stuck, and it's just a lack of information oftentimes, I think.
Mhm. What do you feel like in your journey of personal growth, developing these tools for yourself, the practice of checking in and choosing to show up joyfully and powerfully as you are in the world? What do you feel like has been the single greatest tangible shift that you've seen for yourself in your life?
I think it's realizing that there's there's and this is the woo woo that I love. Like, I'll just dive into the woo. Uh, it's it's like I've said the word surrender before, um, and I think it's in my life, at least, before really experiencing what that means. It was always easier for me to absorb that as just a concept, but once 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 you get to a point, and I even think it's an energetic point, um where you just fully surrender um everything as it is, when you've done the work really to say, like, hey, I'm not aware of anything I could do better. Actually, I've really really tried, and try again,
Mhm.
to be like empty of all things that could distract, and getting past that point then into my life, and any imaginable outcome is completely surrendered to the process, right? Like, there's nothing left for me to worry about or ruminate on. um that has been my most major shift and change, and
Mhm.
milestone, I would say, in this process process of, um, I'll use the word becoming, maybe self-actualized or self-realized or whatever you want to call it too. Um, but it's then that it's like, and I do meditation pretty regularly, but maybe not in the sense of the word that most people interpret it as. um I'll use my mind as a meditative tool and ask myself questions, and then go through an intellectual process that I think is very spiritual too. Um, Learning how to do that from a place of uh, utter surrender, not just the concept of surrender, like feeling surrendered in every cell and whatever of me,
Mhm.
that, um, I love how you say that's when the magic happens, because it's so true. And I think the magic is actually normal, how what our normal should look like, and it's very soothing. And
Yeah.
I think if um we when we start to really really see, not just with our eyes but with our knowing, that there's meaning in everything. I'm not saying, like, I hate it. It can, depending on the context, not sit quite right with me when people say everything happens for a reason, maybe to someone who's grieving, or That's not what I mean. What I am saying is that when we look around, we can derive meaning out of everything and every experience, and when we look close enough and are practiced, um, to any degree, I think it can happen. Whether or not we've just, you know, opened ourselves up to the possibility of living a life of surrender
Sure.
yesterday or whatever. I think it's all the same. Um, we really start to see that we're guided, I believe, um, and and the little nudges that were once more of like a dull intuition become sharper, more clear messages.
Yeah.
And I think we can all attest to our intuition, right? Like just a feeling of, maybe if I do this, I think something bad might happen. So I don't know why, but like I've got enough spiritual evidence that's just nudging me I don't know, I can't put my finger on it, but my intuition tells me this, and for good reason, I think. And so like that's going to be, if we listen to that, it's always in our favor. um that that's a muscle, I think. And
Yeah.
it doesn't have to be a dull voice. It can be an everyday lifestyle of really listening, um and then learning lessons based on that, out of our own conversations of intellect, um, with self. And so that super over answers your question.
Yeah. No, I'm here for it. I thought it was awesome. Here's something that I want to share, just a real quick anecdote and then ask you a question, because this is something that comes up for me often in my own life. And I know it does for some of my coaching clients, but also definitely people listening to this show. So, talking about surrender, allowing space for these little intuitive hits, these like deep knowings as we have them. When I flew to Columbus, Ohio, where I live now, and got off of the airplane, was going down the escalator into the baggage claim to see my now wife in person for the very first time, every fiber of my being knew, oh my God, I'm going to marry this person. And it was absolutely terrifying in the moment. It was this all encompassing, unassailably like correct fact that this is who I was going to marry. I hadn't even hugged her yet, hadn't given her a kiss, like none of these things. And I just knew. And
Mhm.
to me, I interpret that as surrender, like surrendering to that in the moment and then allowing, the relationship to play out in good faith, like being an active part of it, obviously, but still knowing that this was the end goal in mind. I feel that a lot of people are in such a place of needing to control the process, control their human experience, that when I, with some of my clients, have invited them to step into surrender, and using the word surrender is actually very triggering to a lot of people who are used to controlling and micromanaging really everything in their lives. And so I'm just curious, if you were to put your life coach hat on for a hot second, how would you invite people to step into this place of surrender so that they can create that magic for themselves?
Mhm. Yeah. And the words can create that magic for themselves. Some people cannot by decision. And
Really?
it's like, well, because it's a choice, right? And so,
Hmm.
not to say that they couldn't if they decided differently, but they cannot because they've not. So say somebody's a bodybuilder and they've been training every single day to lift,
Hmm.
500 pounds or whatever bodybuilders do.
Yeah, yeah.
My trainer's gonna be like, "You don't know anything." I don't. But they're able because they've chosen to be able. But say if someone like me who doesn't lift 500 pounds, I'm a bad example, 200 pounds, 100 pounds, um, if I've decided that that's not something I'm going to practice, that I'm going to show up without the tools uh, to accomplish that. And so I am not able by choice. And so um, I would say that becoming able um, starts with a true desire and not just a conversation about desire necessarily, although that's really helpful, and necessary to have support and coaches and a network around for that. Um, but the process for me and where I'm coming from in my description of this is really analyzing why I'm not where I want to be and what the therapeutic process is going to be for me to get to A to B. And if
Mhm.
I'm at A and I have some trauma in my life that's limiting me in a certain way and I want to get to B, like I have to do the work of dismantling my system and picking through the entrails of me to find like the rotten bits, right, that we all have based on insecurities or trauma or um, ingrained ways of unproductive thought or just all of it. And we need help. We need and I see a therapist for I've seen a therapist for almost 2 years now. Um, and I'm proud of that. I think it's really important. And having people, such as yourself, um, who are informed and centered on as true examples of lifestyle um, changes that have happened intentionally, going through that process of and that's where all of the work really starts and ends there in the beginning to open ourselves up. Even, I mean, how are you gonna accomplish anything if you're so closed off within yourself? You can't receive anything and you don't have anything to give because what you receive is what you give, and we're just an open conduit of whatever it is that our lives should be. And so when someone's blocked up, it's because of something possibly very terrible that's happened, or just a belief system that they don't know any differently, other than, or whatever the reason, we
Mhm.
become psychologically strained and spiritually clogged, I think. We don't have the energy to give because we're too busy trying to put out the fires of ourselves, and we aren't spending enough time asking ourselves the question of what the source of the fire is. And if we never do that, then we're just stuck. And
Yeah.
so it's really, really, really unpacking your own stuff, taking a hard look in the mirror, and going through a lot of pain to come out the other side. And
Yeah.
that's tough. It's really hard to do.
It is tough, but it's also very worth it,
Yeah.
and this is something we've talked about on other episodes on the show, but just the concept of like disease is actually dis-ease and it's in our bodies and it's often from the stuff that we're stuffing down and not willing to look at. And I've been on the record multiple times. My very first back surgery happened at age 20. I was a student at U of O and it was from a weight training accident, but the next 4 back surgeries I had before age 29 were all psychosomatic for the most part. They were the parts of me that I was not willing to look at, and it manifested in my body in pain and stress and debilitating pain. And so
Mm.
it's I just think interesting that you're bringing this up because it's been such a lived experience for me in my life, and choosing to do this work, choosing to stand in a place of responsibility for myself and my human experience on this earth has allowed me to create something new for myself, to really, like you said, look inward at the things that I'm doing and perpetuating that aren't working, getting underneath why I started doing those things in the first place has changed my life, quite
Yeah.
frankly. And I wouldn't be the man I am today, wouldn't be the husband, wouldn't be the father to my stepson that I am. And just quite frankly, with this show wouldn't exist without doing the work and having a conversation with you today, Allison. And so thank you for highlighting that. Is there anything else about looking inward, taking that look in the mirror that you want to add that you maybe feel like you haven't so far?
Yeah, I really love, thank you for sharing that. Yeah, mind body connection is so, it's a very personal thing. And to share any part of that is really like allowing people in at a different level too. Um, so I really appreciate you sharing that with me too.
You're welcome. Thank you for
Yeah,
listening.
yeah, absolutely. Um, I think it's the fear of people entering into a process of really looking at self and going through that that process of discovering the reasons why we do things that are not self-serving. Um, I think a lot of fear comes because people don't know that there's so much joy on the other side of it, and
Yeah.
it right, like it's not a process of stuckness in that for forever, and in fact, it's kind of like not that long. Um, Feels like it. It's very painful or can be, and uncomfortable, but like those things don't kill us, and to go
Mm,
through that does take a lot of courage, but it takes a lot of faith and um and just believing that there's going to be light at the end of the tunnel through that, um is the energy and the hope and faith and drive to 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 get through, and a knowingness that the space within that used to be so preoccupied and worried and needing to control turns then into a space of quietness and okayness and solitude and a craving almost for spending more and more time with yourself because you just really like yourself and you just really love yourself and you can learn so much from yourself. And that is an adventure. And
yeah.
I want to tell people like this life is so, despite the circumstances, suffering can be very inspiring too. You know, this life is an adventure and it should be, and there should be I like to sometimes I visualize like a bowling alley with like bumpers on the side and I'm just doing this.
Uh-huh.
I don't know what I'm doing, but there's guidance from somewhere and something, and I really believe in that, and that's where I put all of my hope and faith. And it's like walking off a ledge like a fool, um into the beauty of tranquility and what that translates to in outward success. Um,
Yeah.
and so the fear of going through the pain of dismantling a process that's not working, um, I get why people kind of don't want to go there. It's
Sure.
painful, right? I get it. There's no judgment. Um, but the knowledge and the sound bite and bit of information that's perhaps lacking when there's so much fear is that it's not forever and it leads to something so much richer.
Mhm. What do you feel like you're currently working through fear-wise?
Yeah, that's a good question. What am I afraid of right now? I'm in a lot of ways stepping out into an unknown. I'm going through a pretty big life change, and I'm starting to, not that I'm not continuing to create mascot work. I am, and I still really love it. But I'm starting to do more inspired work from me, and it's made me really take a look at like why and I believe it was the right mentality at the right time. Starting campus sculptures was like, okay, like I need to sell something for like money because and I have none of the money for the food. And so the idea did not come from me, I don't feel, but it was a solution to a problem and something that I was really going to love creating in the meantime. And so it's like building a business around profitability uh, for the right reasons. But now I'm flipping that, and I don't know what business I'm building now. And I feel like I don't really have to know, but there's an amount of fear that comes along with that, with like, okay, like here's my inspired work. It comes out of the depths of my soul. Is that enough marketing persuasion to get people to buy it? I don't know. Like, here's my soul. Like it's, um, but I know I can trust that though. I don't know what it looks like yet, but it's the same type of listening to the nudges that started me off in business to begin
Yeah.
with. But I'm making a change, and it's like, okay, like I'm not chasing the money, I'm chasing the art and the inspiration, and then trusting that the money will be magically made available to me. Which I do know. But I would say that that's a source of, it's a point of fear that I have a relationship with right now. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, well, thank you for sharing. And, for what it's worth, I experience you as having such an amazing relationship with yourself that I imagine you will figure it out. And, I know that at least on Instagram, you've been sharing some poetry recently that you've written that I thought was awesome. And also, some more symbolic work that isn't maybe as commercialized as a statue of the duck that somebody can buy. But, if it is true and authentic for you, then it will resonate with somebody. And
Mhm.
maybe that's me choosing an example of surrender in this moment on your behalf, just to make this go full circle. But, I just want to acknowledge you for following your heart, following the nudges, as you've been saying throughout this conversation. And so, it's hard to believe, but we've already been chatting for almost an hour. And, I want to make sure that folks know where they can connect with you. So, what are the best ways for people to connect with you, connect with your work, just hit you up if anything that you shared today resonated with them and they want to follow up with? What are the places people should get in touch with you, Allison?
Yeah. My website is campussculptures.com, and that's a lot of my mascot work and some inspired work on there too. And my Instagram is Alison Caswell, I think. I don't know. Double check that because I'm not looking at my Instagram. What even is it? And so that's a great place to connect with me, either through a message or however. And and then we have a website, caswellsculpture.com. that's a joint owned site also, that has some of my work on it. But my site for my company, is Campus Sculptures. Yeah.
Awesome. Awesome. So, Allison, I cannot thank you enough for being on the show today. I know I learned a lot from listening to you and the wisdom that you've compiled over the last decade plus. And final question I want to ask you today: what are you acknowledging yourself for today?
I like that. Yeah. Um, I think that creating a framework for something is really important, and realizing that you can, amidst all of the fear, right? Um, you can organize yourself in a certain way to build in a framework so that you have a plan, for things. And I think that that's what I've done, and maybe not knowing at the time that I've done that, or that I'm doing that. Um, it's building an organizational structure as an internal system, knowing that, um, there are steps that it took to get me to where I'm currently at, and there's certain steps that I'll go through to get where I want to be. And I don't I don't flail around in business, um, so much as there is organization to having faith also.
Mhm.
It's not like just being windswept. It's standing firm in where you know you're supposed to be, and having faith that you can put all your weight on where you're supposed to be. Um, there's, I'll get a little bit more into the woo woo. Like, to make this maybe make more concrete sense. Um, I'm I read a book, or well, I shouldn't say I read the book. I read an outline of the book, "The Internal Castle" by Saint Teresa, um, and more of like a this is like a more spiritual conversation, right? But when I say the word framework, I think it's cool to investigate things like this, because in her mind, like, and maybe in her spirit, we have different we're a castle, right? And we have these different parts of us, and it's going through the process of self-discovery and learning from other people what that framework could look like as a general sense. Really, in our growth, it's like we can have faith that we will go through more steps in this process of just learning and discovery and adventure. And according to other people, this is what it might look like, right?
Mhm.
And not as necessarily a religious topic, but more of a, we can have a framework, and it's the most exciting, adventurous thing ever, just to know that we're having faith in something real, right?
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, no, I think we could keep going on for another hour or so just on that, but
Yeah.
we unfortunately don't have that luxury today. And again, Allison, I want to thank you for being on the show. My mind is blown, and I'll be re-listening to this when I go to edit, and I'll probably be taking even more notes because I feel like I learned a lot from you today. And so I know that people who are listening to this did as well. So, folks, please share in the comments what your biggest takeaways are. Definitely leave them there so Allison knows. And again, we'll post her contact info in the show notes below so that you can connect with her and, just continue the conversation as well. And again, please like, subscribe, share, leave a review. Again, it helps create more relevancy in the search engines on all the different platforms for finding the show and finding Allison and what she's up to. And so, again, Allison, thank you for being here today. This was your Inside Track to Success. I'm your host, Stuart Krantz. See you guys next week.